Tonight. This is a beautiful evening. Beautiful smiling faces around. I'm humbled, honored, appreciative of you taking a chance, freeing up your afternoon evenings and joining us. It's not light to get in a car and drive anywhere anymore, and let alone leave your family, friends, for an evening that you probably don't know exactly how to define, but we're going to help you. My name is Michael Levy. I get the privilege of running DHIT. DHIT stands for the Digital Health Institute for Transformation. We're a research 501c3 organization that supports communities, individuals, and organizations through the process of digital transformation. That process is very human, hence why we gather together as humans to get to know each other, connect, and bring our ecosystem together in a common goal to try to be better tomorrow and be better in the future, and leverage our technologies, our digital capabilities, and our newfound intelligence to do so and activate ourselves. So thank you for joining us. Super excited to be here with our pop-up speaker today. I met Jason O'Meara, is that correct? I'm always brutal at names, so I'm happy I nailed that one, thank you. Easy. I met Jason about a month ago at the NCHIT Digital Health 2025 Summit. Woo woo! Anybody in this in this room tonight at the summit? There we go. All right. It was a delight to speak to Jason. Got really interested in what he's doing at Pfizer. Hence, I asked him to join. He graciously said yes, and here we are tonight. This is what we do. We bring leaders in the ecosystem that are doing phenomenal things to accessible points for us to disseminate knowledge and insights in an equitable manner as best we can. So thank you, Jason, for joining us.
It's good to be here.
We're going to take a journey with Jason. We're going to talk about who Jason is a little bit, and then what Jason has been up to at Pfizer over the last 6 years, and then, of course, what Jason plus Pfizer means for our future. Jason currently serves as the Vice President of Digital Strategic Initiatives at Pfizer, but as you look at his background, he's worked his way up through a lot of different roles, and all anchored in technology, digital capacity building, architecture and design, and unleashing the future as soon as it could possibly be unleashed. So thank you, Jason.
I should change my LinkedIn blurb for that. That was awesome.
We got it recorded. That's the other thing. We'll be sharing this, and hopefully y'all share it if you like it, and spread the knowledge and spread the name. Jason, technology background. I will also say you are literally a person divided with Duke and UNC as your backbone. So we won't go into those specifics, but maybe you can just share through your lens right now, about 25 plus years on this, proverbial, I won't say ladder, but kind of slope, north slope, to impacting our communities and our world through what you do. What is the basis of your interest in technology, and then perhaps if there was somebody starting out in their journey today, or even mature in their journey, like what do you tell somebody to keep pushing against the unknown every day?
Yeah, it's that's a great question. So I think one of the biggest things is always to be learning. So I see myself as a lifelong learner. That's ultimately how you continue to be better, and it's not only learning for yourself, it's also how do you teach your organization to be a learning organization as well. Like, how can you always be pushing the organization to learn more, experience more, and ultimately have a humble approach to what they understand and what they still need to learn? Because that's also very key. Because ultimately, when we are, for example, bringing a customer solution, we always have to tell ourselves that we are not the customer is a customer, and we have to learn what they're going through in their daily lives, and then how can our solution help them achieve their goals better. So that idea of a learning organization and a learning career path has always been really important to me. I guess just back, rewinding a little bit on my career path, I came out of Duke University. I'm still a huge Blue Devil fan. Came so close to getting the national title this year. And then I also went to, I had a few years in consulting, tried a few different industries, life sciences as well as finance. I just got hooked on healthcare and life sciences because it's like such a complex domain with so many opportunities for changing the world. So I eventually got my Master of Health Administration at UNC Public Health School. It's like the MBA healthcare blend. And then from there I had increasing roles within enterprise architecture and eventually became the Vice President of Enterprise Architecture and Digital Innovation at Pfizer back in 2019. Was in that role for about 3 years and about 3 years now with leading digital transformation at Pfizer.
And that Capgemini was an Ernst & Young consulting practice that you started. So I'm imagining that learning cycle, that discovery lens was super wide from a consulting perspective, just absorbing varied perspectives. But you've been tailoring that and honing that in, and now you're at a point within Pfizer where you're aggregating that knowledge. And what was, when you look at the many roles, was there a common theme of barriers that you kept pushing against as it relates to technical feasibility, technical implementation, and impact against these digital initiatives?
Yeah, I think that's always, what I've learned over the years is that the technology is a tool, a capability that you can leverage into solving some type of problem. But ultimately you have to fall in love with the problem, you have to fall in love with the use case, and then from there discover what's the appropriate technology set that realizes the approach to solving that problem. So like early on in my career, it was like really easy to fall in love with a glorious technology and say this is going to solve world hunger, but ultimately like by falling in love with the problem and working, like taking a product management mindset to really understanding that problem deeply, and also an architecture mindset to really understanding your path to solving that problem, then marrying those two things together is where you can really drive digital transformation.
Can you give an example? Let's say you share with me Pfizer's COVID response and kind of what y'all had to do to very quickly kind of pivot in terms of thinking and serving from a consumer perspective. Can you share a little bit with us?
Yeah, a lot of the key innovations of the last 5 years in my particular career path has been around the application of AI to meaningful business challenges within Pfizer. That's where I spend a lot of my time these days. And we are today in like a humongous transformational journey with applying AI into every aspect of Pfizer. But it didn't start there. Like back in 2019, we're still proving out the applicability and impact that AI and data analytics can actually have in the business. And when we had set up the infrastructure just in time, like we had actually unlocked our clinical trial systems. If you think about a clinical trial system, historically, it was literally a filing cabinet, where you put like paper files into the filing cabinet and you lock that filing cabinet, and only certain people can unlock that because it has a lot of compliance repercussions if you unblind the study too early. So it was a super lockdown system, and ultimately that data was inaccessible to analytical use cases. And we had unlocked that data just in time for the COVID trials, because we had to accelerate those trials faster than anything that we've ever done before in Pfizer history. Like a traditional trial usually would run like several years, and certainly a vaccine trial would run several years. But we had to go through and prove out all the same things. We had the same level, the same thresholds, the same accountability to scientific accuracy, but we had to prove it out so much quicker. So that meant that we had to go from a scale of literally 10 times to 100 times larger in terms of our clinical trial to execute it that much faster. We went from a trial that might have been like 400 people normally to 44,000 people. So we had to like massively scale our systems. And when we were scaling our systems, we were also scaling our processes around those systems. One of the key processes is called the data query, which when data comes in from a given clinical trial site, we as a sponsor are ultimately accountable for the quality of that data. And we had partnered with, through the Digital Health and the Digital Innovation Lab, we had found a company that was actually able to help us scale those data query processes by capitalizing on the unlocked clinical trial data with the appropriate security and controls around it to basically accelerate our ability to do those quick data queries faster. We still ultimately had to scale to an extra 800 people, but the head of our safety function said we probably would have needed 8,000 people if it weren't for the digital solution. So like we had certain proof points of like the AI helping within our COVID trials, and even within the COVID vaccine design, we had to actually run AI to optimize the actual structure of our vaccine to reduce the occurrences of side effects. And that was through like many simulation runs and a lot of AI on the design side as well. So we had proven out that AI was highly capable and actually was able to solve like tangible business problems within Pfizer. And then coming off of that COVID, then the challenge is how do we bring that out to every part of Pfizer and our customers as well.
I mean, that's a phenomenal value story, ROI very clear, 10 or 100x capable, solution after implementation. But you used a word I want to highlight and circle. You said we had to. I don't know if you noticed that, but that's a very interesting word because the difference between have to and want to is a mandate and an urgency that forced the have to moment. And now the question is it have to or want to?
Now we absolutely take those learnings that we built within our COVID response. We've taken that into many different initiatives throughout Pfizer. Now, ultimately, one of the key things that we learned is that everything cannot be a priority. Like there is importance in choosing what the priorities are, but those priorities are the things that we absolutely have to do. So in any given year, there might be like 15 to 20 things that the company overall has chosen as a have-to list. But in that situation, everyone knows what the priorities are. Everyone knows that these are the top projects, the top programs that we absolutely must do fantastically well. And then that allows the entire organization to rally around doing those things appropriately with we call it the light speed response. Like we have to go as fast as possible to bring this, let's say an oncology solution to market, or how can we bring a solution for digital health for people as well.
That's incredible. Light speed response. Again, I'm going to take that and bring it into my home and see if it works with my 10-year-old girls for some rapid dish cleaning. And we'll get into another.
Is that a have to moment?
Yeah, that is a have to moment. You're at a point where you're about 6 years post this have to moment. You're riding implementation and digital transformation internally across Pfizer to optimize business function, ultimately make things better, faster, less expensive, and more accurate through the use of. When does it touch me, the individual? When does a community start to play a role in that fabric?
Yeah, so let me talk to one step before we brought it out externally. So we had to we have a fantastic generative AI journey within Pfizer, and it started by first and foremost understanding the technology and educating the individuals at Pfizer. We actually sat down for about 6 to 8 weeks with our executive leadership team, bringing in external experts on generative AI, talking about the applicability of generative AI. And this is back in the early stages of generative AI adoption, 2022 timeframes. And then ultimately, we decided in June of that year that we were going to have every leader on the executive leadership team, all 11 of them, chose 2 use cases within their departments to have production MVPs working by the end of that year. So that went out to, of course, commercial, which they do amazing innovation all the time, went out to our research department, it even went out to our enabling functions, like within HR, within compliance, within our legal teams, within every part of our business. We basically challenged each of those organizations to contemplate how they could potentially apply generative AI capabilities to optimize their process. And we had a pretty high bar. We wanted to see at least a 20% improvement on the baseline by applying generative AI. We are very early adopters of generative AI. We were there before Azure even was open for use with ChatGPT and OpenAI. We were in the early beta for that because we were there ready to go with use cases before Azure was even ready to offer us the ability. And as soon as we let it leak that we were doing this, Meta came to us with their Llama models and said, hey, we'd love to do those same use cases on our time and dime to prove to you that this will work. And of course, like Anthropic with AWS. So by the end of that year, we had
By
the end of that year, we had tested and learned across many different generative AI models Ultimately, 21 of the 22 use cases got to MVP and eventually
Wow.
scaled. That was through, honestly, a whole lot of hard work. And probably the hardest lift was actually on our legal team because they had to go in and sign generative AI agreements that didn't even exist. There was no such thing as a legal template around a generative AI agreement. So that was actually a huge cost driver. But we knew that we had to tackle that problem, and ultimately probably made all of your lives easier in adopting it because we went through those negotiations and we got the terms set properly. But now I'm happy that we did that because we ultimately built internal expertise around how we can truly deeply understand these technologies at the core very deeply, and then we're able to apply them to more and more use cases over time.
Was that culture there before? Because that's a culture, right? I mean,
Right.
you don't have that investment, that discipline over time, and the patience and the fortitude unless there's a mandate culturally and a buy-in culturally. Is that palpable at Pfizer?
Yeah, that's definitely core to the ethos, I guess you can say, of Pfizer's digital organization, and some of the key principles that we have in how we run the organization. That the constant learning, the agility, I guess you can say, is the easiest word to sum that up, and that's agility in all the right ways. Like test and learn, like don't be afraid to fail. Small empowered teams, like drive the accountability down into the teams to actually make the decisions where the decisions matter, where the expertise lies. Let's make sure to have the appropriate cross-functional teams. Like a digital person that doesn't understand the business is not as powerful as bringing everyone together on the same team with the same common goal. So we spend a lot of time on like team design and team dynamics and accountabilities, and ultimately that allows us to be much more effective in what we choose to do, and prioritization.
It matches. I tend to geek out on the similarities, almost mirror images between the digital networks and infrastructures that thrive in building unbiased AI systems trained well and robust in terms of its architecture as well, mirrored to a human being or a collection of human beings that are organized and operating in a network with the same type of unbiased, egoless, problem-solving objective, right? And it's again, everything goes back to my family and my home, because I try to do this with my girls. How can we be a team instead of four people at odds with each other? But it's collaboration, empathy, intentional design, and grit. I think that is unspoken attributes that it seems help flourish your digital organization.
And that takes a lot of, like you're saying, it takes a lot of culture building to bring people in and give them the tools and the expertise and the trust that they can do great work, right, at the end of the day.
That is, I hope we all have that opportunity on a day-to-day basis. If not, you've come to the right place, if only for the night, to be optimized and fulfill your potential, because it is something that you have to intentionally find the right environment for and nurture that environment with.
And one other thing that you said that's really important is the AI is not trust and bias. So AI is trained on human data, and human data has bias, period, right? So we do have to be very intentional about bias in our AI systems, and ultimately the way that we have what we call the Ethicara suite, which actually looks at the underlying data that's used to train our AI models and actually bring forth the biases that we see in the underlying data to our scientific and medical teams and say, is this bias like a legitimate scientific fact? Is there a reason for this bias to exist? Or is this actually skewed based on the biases that exist in human beings? So by bringing those things to the forefront, we're able to make decisions about those biases that we see and not let that creep in and then become part of the scale that ultimately propagates bias, which is not good.
The necessary check and balance that give you the guardrails to know that you're doing the right thing on a continuous basis.
And ultimately, every AI system that we produce has a human accountable for the AI. And we believe that's important, even going forward. There's always has to be a human in the loop. There's always has to be human oversight. And ultimately, this is a tool that makes humans more productive and efficient.
So 6 years in now, I hope you'll entertain my community question now, because I think we've exposed and explored the capabilities now built at Pfizer, and really I would say almost the muscles. I talk about the muscles. This is a gym. You've got to first get the equipment and learn how to use the equipment, and then be comfortable. And now it's regular and routine. Now, what do you do with that body that you have?
Right. So this actually started with, again, we fell in love with the problem that we saw. So during our COVID response, there was so much misinformation and disinformation circulating within like human conversation and online that people were struggling to find trustworthy sources of information. So with that backdrop of the problem that we saw that was impacting not only, is impacting the human response to a horrible pandemic, right? So it's in everyone's best interest to have everyone take the appropriate precautions and ultimately get vaccinated, so it stops the spread of this disease and makes, if you do get exposed to the disease, like you're not going to be as worse off as you can be. But at the time, there was a lot of pushback and blowback against that, as well as just science in general now. Like we're actually seeing erosion in the trust of science, oftentimes because it's like people get paid by ads that they can like generate by saying controversial things on social platforms, and there's no repercussions other than them getting a better paycheck at the end of the day.
Right.
So like with these disinformation cycles that are powerful, that exist in the world, we as Pfizer wanted to do something about this. So we decided to create Health Answers by Pfizer. It's a trusted question and answer service that you can literally ask any health and wellness question to this generative AI chatbot, and it's trusted and backed by only medical and scientific information. So based on all this expertise that we've built over the years in fine-tuning and training these generative AI models to like go after and use trusted information only, like we are able to take that into use case that actually is meaningful to individuals on a daily basis. So like, let's say you just found out your wife is pregnant, like what next?
Right.
Like what do I need to know about pregnancy? I just was diagnosed with cancer. What do I need to know about like breast cancer, for example? So like any question, and it's rooted in trusted scientific documents. We have AI contracts with many of the key health publishers, Harvard Health Publishing, Doctorpedia, others, and we also have, and then of course all the great information that comes out, NIH, CDC, FDA, and other public sources.
So, I mean, not to simplify it, but it sounds like a WebMD certified as it relates to getting the credible information at your fingertips. Is it just information? Are you going to be able to act and transact and engage with a broader supply chain?
Yeah. So every time you ask a question, we of course try to answer that question as quickly as possible. But then immediately after that, we have a series of, I guess you can say, modules that allow you to engage further on those topics. So we have trusted documents and materials to explore further. For example, we've published our own, like roughly 10,000 articles are pre-published on these to explore the fuller journey of understanding oncology or cancer or even arthritis pain. So we have like journeys that you can go on to dive deeper, or we have try at home options, or even you can choose to engage with health services. Like maybe you need to have a mental health conversation to really deeply understand. So we're not trying to replace doctors or physicians. We're trying to help you understand the basics and guide you to engage with healthcare services appropriately, being empowered and being knowledgeable, just a little bit more knowledgeable about where you sit in your own care journey, so you can really advocate for it.
So on those top priorities that you have to do, I'm sure there's a set of them tied to this. As it relates to like what success looks like and how you kind of track it, let's say end of year and or end of this decade, what does Healthways look like from that did what it was supposed to do?
Yeah, it's honestly, it's motivated purely by trying to do good for society. Like this is, we are separated, like we have a separate charter from everything else at Pfizer. We're not motivated to sell more drugs or anything along those lines. It's truly about making health information more accessible to the average human being and giving them the tools that they can use to act upon that information in a meaningful way. So we are looking for other partners who want to like plug into this channel that we're developing. We have currently like a few different telehealth as well as like ways to find local services in your local area to help bridge into healthcare. But we're open to exploring other ways of branching off into the broader community as well over time.
I love that. Maybe we can take a pause here and actually engage our community a little bit with some Q&A. Any questions to get the party started here?
The chatbot example that you gave was really interesting. And one of the challenges I would imagine is that in that case, you're relying on consumers to come into Pfizer. And I don't know if there's examples that you have where you've partnered with health plans or with health systems in implementing these systems where it's targeted to say, instead of inviting anybody and their brother, which you always would, how do you target those that might need the information most and bring them into that service? I don't know if you've created those kind of bridges to health plans or health systems to do that.
So we've started having some conversation. So first of all, we're very early on. This service, actually, Health Answers by Pfizer, just got launched with our Super Bowl ad back on February 8th. So we're still doing our baby steps, but honestly, like we're in this phase of like exploring what's the potential. And we have had a lot of, so we do have our, we've heard some like really telling types of anecdotes coming back from the community. So for example, one of our team members was at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and they were using the system with the Memorial Sloan Kettering doctors, oncologists at their side, and they're blown away. Like they're absolutely floored by how clear and concise we are able to distill very complex topics into something that's like human readable and actionable. And they're like, oh wow, I wouldn't have thought about describing it that way. So it's actually, that's one of the, and we did this intentionally by we have a scientific and technical advisory committee where we brought together a lot of advisors from different walks of life in different areas. Actually, one of them is from Duke University. And they advised us on how to actually tune the language appropriately to patient consumption and consumer consumption. And that's actually one of the most challenging things, because especially when we're sourcing from scientific and medical knowledge, which is very information dense and language rich, into something that can be read at a 5th grade reading level for like standard like human consumption. That's actually one of the biggest challenges that we have to tackle.
Like lab values? And what
Yeah, you can actually put in lab values and I'll give you some guidance on how to talk to your doctor about those.
That's incredible. Did you want to ask your?
Sure. I know that the Health Answers for Pfizer predates what's the significant public health cuts recently. But I feel like I'm hearing from my clients in pharma and healthcare that they are deeply concerned about the additional burden of health education based on those cuts. Not just in referencing source material, but how much do we have to do, right? Because that's still part of our journey and our customer's journey. So I'm curious to sort of combat the overwhelm. What kinds of conversations or advice do you have as we take on this situation with significant, and they won't go away pretty quickly. It will take many years probably to recover that.
I know, it's the erosion in like the NIH funding and other scientific and medical backing, it is very challenging. I mean, if we think about it, that's a huge proportion of the material that we draw upon is actually publicly derived. We're advancing the scientific good for the greater community through the NIH and the FDA and CDC and otherwise. And we, as this product uses that public information to help answer those questions that are pressing in the everyday mind. So it is the key thing that we're keeping an eye on, and we see when content gets taken down or we see when new content comes up. So we're definitely watching it, but ultimately is foundational to our ability as a society to continue to understand and learn more about science and medicine. It's very true.
So earlier you talked about finding biases in your data, and that's really good. It's really important. I'm interested in if you could talk more about the process and what type of biases have you found in Pfizer and data?
Yeah, so one good use case around bias was there's a rare disease called ATTR-CM. It's a version of amyloidosis where basically in your body there's a butterfly-shaped molecule, and sometimes the binding in the middle actually just breaks, and these two pieces start freely circulating through your body and ultimately end up accumulating in a lot of different systems. It can accumulate in your skin as different lesions. It can accumulate in your wrist as like wrist and carpal tunnel inflammation. It can accumulate in your heart as like heart disease. It can accumulate in different organs across your body. And ultimately, as a person with this disease, you might be going to an endocrinologist, you might be going to a cardiologist, you might be going to a dermatologist with this smattering of different symptoms, where each one of those doctors is like basically treating that one representation, but not really truly understanding the underlying disease. So at Pfizer, we were studying that disease, and we actually looked at it from a data perspective, and the journey of the patient was typically around 5 to 7 years from the first onset of symptoms to the actual ultimate diagnosis of amyloidosis, ATTR-CM in particular. So we had trained an AI model on actually how to understand that journey and try to inform doctors and clinicians about the risk profiles that we're seeing in the data associated with this particular journey. Now, we saw like some biases came out through those real-world evidence studies, that when we put them in front of a doctor, like there were differences between male and female incidence rates, and the doctor's like, there's nothing that would have led to that, or there's difference between different races, and again, our medical experts are like, race should not have anything to do with this particular disease. You're not a higher risk of it if you have this particular race. So by actually running statistical analyses on the epidemiology that we were seeing, and the data that we were seeing on this disease course, we were ultimately able to build a better model by the combination of what we were seeing from the underlying data, plus our medical expertise into something that was ultimately able to better inform clinicians and doctors.
And there's the learning cycle.
And the learning cycle too.
Right. We'll do one more question.
So you talked about like Pfizer's initial journey of adopting AI, starting with like business leaders engaging with experts, coming up with like 2 use cases in their respective area. I'm curious to hear like your thoughts around kind of engaging with the broader employee group and upskill the workforce to really come up with like AI ideas as they're more closer to like the day-to-day problems, activities, and how would you go about like kind of upskill a broader workspace?
Yeah, so it was definitely a top-down, bottoms-up strategy to tackle it from both sides. So the top-down was to get the concept introduced at the leadership level first, but then once it was introduced there, we had intentional training of the next level leaders, and they were the ones that came up with 340 use cases that ultimately were boiled down to 22 that we actually actioned upon. But once we started on those use cases, we realized that by giving these tools into the individual people's hands, we'll have the greatest impact and effect at Pfizer. So we actually allowed for any person to raise their hand and say, I want to actually go through some AI training on the basics of appropriate and ethical AI use, and then ultimately get access to, we have 2 different versions. We have the Microsoft Copilot, which is the one that's embedded into the Microsoft Suite. And then we also have what we call Vox, which like give voice to your computer. And within the Vox platform, we bring together a number of different LLMs into an easy-to-use desktop application that we built ourselves. And we ultimately allowed for the business to buy into this. So any person can raise their hand. It has a specific yearly cost that is actually charged back to the business managers, because we wanted to make sure that they're like choosing to adopt this tool. But ultimately, at this point, I think we're up to like 45,000 people who have Copilot licenses, and something like 30,000 people have opted into our Vox platform.
That's sick.
So it's like you've got, and that's not just like throw it over the wall. That's like deep training. So we have like training curriculums. We have our AI university on how to do appropriate prompt engineering. And the AI University is built upon like content from like Harvard. Harvard has great content. LinkedIn has some great content. So we try to make it easy for our people to adopt as well.
I love it. Where are your job openings? Because I'm coming. To that point, if I were to join, or any of us, or this community, where are we going with this? Like, what is, I don't want to say quantum computing. This would be my dream question to ask you, and like, what technology is coming, and like, those who know me, I repeat this phrase over and over again. I'm gonna start with it every single day, which is this 1925 in the 21st century. Let that sink in for a second. We're at the very beginning of this century. We're in the future, if we believe so, and it's for us to pull it. And so if that's true, and the wave of transformations coming down at a greater rate than it did in the 20th century, this conversation 5 years from now is going to look very different. What does it look? What are you thinking?
So I'd say right now we're very excited about agentic AI. So it's basically taking the LLM model and giving it access to tools, APIs, and orchestration layer that allows it to actually do work on your behalf. So of course we're going to start out with like very limited use cases, but I think it was Gartner was thinking like 25% of all business processes are going to be orchestrated by agentic AI by 2028. And we believe that. That is perfectly legitimately plausible in our minds in what we're experiencing in these early stages of agentic AI and its capabilities. We're doing a very controlled adoption, very similar to what we do with generative AI, but I think agentic AI is now, and I do think quantum computing is next. Like, I do think that's, like, we have a quantum computing team that has 8 researchers within it, looking at some really powerful use cases, but I will say that right now, most of the time, the quantum-inspired high-performance computing networks are able to do almost as good a job as a quantum computer, but it's just a matter of time before we have enough qubits into a unified network that will see like the quantum advantage really taking hold. So I do think quantum is next, and it's going to hit us, like, you're surprised about what happened with AI and generative AI over the last 2 years. Quantum is going to be massive as well.
Thank you for setting that up and giving us a slight glimpse into the near-term future. But as we look out in the macro time horizon, it's not far in reality that we might be auto-sapiens one day.
Yeah, I do think it's really empowering people to be better versions of themselves at the end of the day. It's how we see AI.
Awesome. Well, if we can give a round of applause for Jason. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. On behalf of the Digital Health Institute for Transformation, we're grateful. This concludes our programming, but does not conclude our night. Please enjoy networking. We'll turn on some music, and the food, beverages, and conversation will continue. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks for having us. How about a round of applause for Mike?